Hello, and welcome to another episode of Boundless Body Radio. I'm your host, Casey Ruff, and today we have another amazing guest to introduce to you now. Colt Milton is a carnivore bodybuilder, competition prep coach, an entrepreneur, and podcast host. He is currently prepping to guest pose at the Open Natural Bodybuilding Competition in Seattle, Washington, along with his wife, Taylor, who is just beginning her first meat-based competition prep. Since losing their corporate jobs during the events of 2020, they launched SupersetYourLife.com, a movement dedicated to health first aesthetics and total body optimization. He also created SkullBellz, which creates skull themed gym equipment. Colt co hosts the Carnivore Coaches Corner podcast with our mutual friend and former Boundless Body Radio guest, Jonathan Griffiths, who we hosted on episode 482 of our show. Colt is also the co-host of the SupersetYourLife.com podcast, where Colt and Taylor Milton discuss, debate, rant, and interview featured guests on developing a healthy, purpose-filled lifestyle. Their favorite topics include health and fitness, marriage, parenting, personal growth, overcoming challenges, other topics requested by clients in the community, and much more. You can find Colt on Instagram at Colt Milton. Colt Milton, what an absolute honor it is to welcome you to Boundless Body Radio.
It's an honor to be here. Thank you for the introduction.
Absolutely. It's so ironic that you and I have appeared on a podcast together that just got released a few hours ago, but we've actually never even had an interaction where we've hosted each other on our podcast.
Yeah, never done a podcast swap before, which is crazy considering how much we have in common, which is just about everything. I mean, health, aesthetics, how we started our businesses, our interests. I mean, we could just be here all day. Our dogs.
Oh, our dog, down to our dogs who look almost exactly the same. It's so funny. So you and I were just hosted on the Carnivore-a-thon, I think is how you say it, with Stephen Thomas. He's somebody that both you and I have chatted with before. And he put on a 24-hour carnivore summit, basically. And both of us had signed up for it to be presenters. It was my first kind of presentation in that type of a format. And mine was like at noon and yours was at 12:30. And so I got to hand off to you, which is great. And as I was hearing the rest of your conversation with him, I heard you mention that you were a hockey player. So as I reached out to get you on my show, I was like, dude, I heard you're a hockey player. Like, that's cool. I'm a hockey player too. We found out that we play the same position. We are the same hand. We're both left-handed. And we both even use almost exactly the same stick, which is a little bit weird.
Same twig. I got it right here. If you're on audio only, I'm sorry, but I'll describe it to you. It's an Easton Mako capillary curve left and 85 flex.
Beautiful. I love that. So in hockey, we have particular slang. So you don't say helmet, you say lid. You don't say gloves, you say mitts. You don't say stick, you say twig, which you did. And
Twig. I apologize for the artist.
No, that's great. No, it's hockey. It's hockey speak. It's great. And as I was sending a quick video over to you to say, dude, we're doing a podcast trade, I was throwing sauce. So can you explain to the listener what it means to throw sauce?
That was some good sauce, man. Like I think you need some steak for that sauce. That's how good that sauce is. So a sauce is think of it like when you throw a football, there's a spiral. That's how you're supposed to throw a football, right? So sauce in hockey is where you pass the puck or shoot the puck in a way that it's not spinning around in circles, but then when it hits the ice, it just lands flat. So like if you're we do it D to D all the time, right? You're a defenseman. So if you're on point, you're gonna pass it over to your other defenseman so he can take a one-timer or whatever. And if there's a forward in between, if the forward's doing his job and covering the other point, you always got to throw it over his stick. And so a sauce pass, either forehand or backhand, is kind of the way to do that. It's an art. And that was a beautiful sauce that you sent me. I was extremely
Thank you very much. I'm not going to tell you how many takes it took me to throw that sauce. But yeah, great description. I think the football analogy is perfect. Like if you're a wide receiver, it's easier to catch that spiral than it is to catch a punt, right? That's flipping all over the place in the air. And so it's easy to lift the puck, but it's harder to get the right spin on it to make the puck spin like a saucer, which is where the name comes from, is saucer pass. And it's short for sauce. And so, anytime we say we're going saucing, it means we're grabbing our sauce kit and we're going to go somewhere, maybe on a beach or in a park, and we're just going to throw those passes back and forth. What you don't want to do is you don't want to throw muffins. A muffin is what we were describing with that punt, where the puck is flipping up and down. So if it's a bad morning with me and my buds and they start chirping me, which means they're talking shit, and say I'm throwing, blueberry muffins or banana nut muffins, I know I'm not passing the puck very well.
Yeah, I've never gotten accused of muffins, but I've been accused of chopping onions. Have you ever been accused of that?
I don't know if I've heard that one.
Chopping onions is that's what they call guys that don't have hands, and I'm kind of one of those guys. I'm a stay-at-home defenseman, right? The guy the guy that would keep the forwards away from our goalie, taking slap shots from the point and stuff, but coast to coast and being able to do anything fancy with my hands, that was never me. So chopping onions is like this.
Nice.
That's
Yeah, nice.
only for the audio only listeners.
Nice.
Not,
That's great.
not very graceful, I should say.
Well, that's fantastic. We could talk hockey slang all day for sure, but you're right. We do have a lot of things in common, including what you mentioned, a real passion in health. I definitely want to talk about something we mentioned in the introduction. We also have in common that we kind of lost our corporate jobs during the pandemic and had to kind of reinvent what we were doing. But let's start with you and your own personal story. You have such an interesting personal story with health. When did you start to become interested in health, and how did nutrition start to become a part of that?
So when I was in high school, this was not a girlfriend or anything, but someone in our high school, when I started lifting weights, said, "Hey, you're looking kind of built." And that was kind of the first compliment that I'd ever got from a girl before. And I was like, you know what? Wow, that makes me feel a lot more confident. And I kept lifting weights, and then I went from being a bench warmer on our football team to filling out and being one of the kind of one of our key players our senior year, and we had a really good season. And so then I started falling in love with weightlifting. I started falling in love with nutrition, realizing what it could do to the human body. My belief is that our body is a temple. 1 Corinthians 6:19-20 says, "Do you not know that your body is a sanctuary of the Holy Spirit who is in you, who you have from God? You are not your own, you are bought with a price, therefore glorify God in your body." And so the way that I train and the way that I feed myself has always been with that in mind. And then going into college, continuing to play club hockey at that time, and continuing to weight lift. I never really knew that bodybuilding was a thing, but after spending some time in the weight room and devouring book after book after book, I started to get bit by the bug, and then read Arnold Schwarzenegger's bodybuilding encyclopedia cover to cover, and I was just like, "This sounds amazing. This is something that I have to do. Maybe just once, do one show, but this is incredible. I mean, I want to look like these guys." And I just, like everybody, thought that every single athlete in that book was natural because they didn't say anything about steroids. And I was like, "Oh wow, yeah, okay, those physiques must be totally achievable." And so I thought it was. And I started getting ready for my first bodybuilding show. And I met my wife at Eastern Washington University a little bit before that. And so it became something that both of us became a bit more passionate about together. I was working a corporate job. She was working a corporate job. Again, this is right out of college, and we wanted to go all in with music, and we wanted to go all in with health. So I went to school for music performance, for classical organ, and for the saxophone. I was the lead alto sax in the Eastern Washington University Jazz Ensemble. And so the art aspect of the sport of bodybuilding really captivated me from the very beginning too. I got to a point to where I saw bodybuilding as both a sport and an art, two things that I was very passionate about. And then once we got married and had kids and everything, not being able to spend as much time playing hockey, I really missed being an athlete, and I really missed being an artist. And so I saw this as a way to be able to do both of those. After I did my first couple shows, I started coaching other people and helping other people do their own shows. That brings us to about 2019, I think. That was my last season where I actually ended up hiring my own coach. The first 4 shows that I did, I completely overtrained, completely over dieted, and I was using the "if it fits your macros" approach, right? Which is, you can eat anything in moderation as long as you stop at a certain amount and you're under a certain amount of calories. And we've completely debunked calories. I mean, all the studies that are coming out are saying that calories don't even, not only do they not matter, they don't even apply to the human body. And so I was subject to a lot of misinformation at the time, contributed to a major eating disorder, and my physique was nothing to be proud of at the time. And so after hiring a coach and helping and having an outside set of eyeballs take a look at my nutrition and my training and make some changes to it, mainly cutting out sugar. That was the most important thing that had to go right away. We cleaned everything up into a bit of a paleo hybrid diet. And so then my next 4 shows, I did quite a bit better. And I got 2nd place in 2019. That was number 8 in Edmonton with my coach. And if I got 1st place, I'd be a pro today, but I still haven't got that pro yet. So maybe someday. So from there, yeah, I was working in refractories. It's basically a construction type corporate job. I was managing a warehouse, and my wife was in fruit exporting. And then so we had 2 kids. It's starting to add up. It was a couple years ago now. And then around the turn of the pandemic is when my company shut down, and we had actually just brought Taylor to be home to be a full-time mom at the time, because that was when we just had our second. So here we are, not really knowing what we were going to do, and Taylor looks at me and goes, well, you have all this experience. You've won best poser trophy how many times? I mean, you know how to pose, you know how to coach, you're a certified personal trainer. She goes, let's just go all in with online training. And I was like, okay. So we did that. I had been doing stand-up comedy for quite a while too. And so I kind of had an itch to start a podcast at some point anyway. So we started our podcast on June 11th of 2020. And since then, I think now we're almost up to 170 episodes. So it's been about 1 a week ever since. And lately we've been hitting it quite a bit harder. And so we're doing about 2 a week right now. And then we've since then started our new show, Carnivore Coach's Corner. And so I think we're 12 or 13 episodes to that. And that's 1 a week. And so going back to the pandemic, when we went all in with online coaching, we weren't completely specialized in the low carb space yet. We started to head that direction around that time ourselves as athletes. And that's when my personal journey with the carnivore diet and with the ketogenic diet really started to become key, because that's what really got me past my eating disorder once and for all. As long as I had carbs in my diet, I was always either big and full and strong and kind of flabby, or really, really lean, but never really anywhere in between the two. The year of 2019, I did 4 shows and I was shredded for basically the entire year straight. And I had like no energy the entire year. My bedroom life was nothing to be super excited about. I just couldn't, I'm not going to go into a whole lot of detail, but I wasn't exactly setting records. Once my fats were very low the entire year, and my carbs were high, and I was doing a lot of cardio. And I was doing a lot of training to my detriment. I was overtraining more so than what my coach was recommending that I do. And then once we started going all in with the podcast and started going all in with realizing how therapeutic and how beneficial this diet was for not just a bodybuilding perspective, but just for our overall health and well-being, we were just like, okay, we're never going back. I'm feeling better. She's feeling better. I think we all kind of go down that rabbit trail where we start on standard American diet. You clean that up. You get to like a paleo-ish area. You clean that up a bit, and then you get to like a keto-ish area. Then you start cutting out a lot of like then you start cutting out fiber and high oxidant plants and other foods that might be problematic or trigger autoimmune issues and stuff like that. I've got to the point now to where my diet is, I'm eating, for the last 3 months, I've eaten pretty much nothing but straight up beef. And I'm eating either a brick or a half of a brick of a keto brick every day. And that's pretty much it. Hardly any chicken, hardly like no eggs really, a little bit here and there. My parents have really good duck eggs, and so I get duck eggs from them. But that's pretty much it. So you could say that I've been on a modified lion diet for quite some time, and it doesn't even feel restrictive. It just feels like exactly what my body needs. When I get hungry, it's pretty much always those foods. And so I'm just sticking with it, and I'm loving it. And actually, most of the people that I'm training right now are kind of eating the same thing. And so I'm seeing a lot of benefits from the Lion diet. When I did my last 4 shows, and when we were seeing what we could do with it, what we could do in terms of competitive bodybuilding with it, I decided to make a comeback. So I wanted to see just if I could beat my old physique, and I decided to compete in NPC this time. Still doing natural shows, but wanting to go into the NPC area for exposure. Looking at the smaller natural federations that tend to test a bit harder when it comes to drug protocols. Those organizations are great, and it's a wonderful opportunity to become a pro if that's what you want to do. If you want to be an athlete, and if you want to be a professional bodybuilder, great. My desire isn't to be a pro so much as it is to make an impact and to spread what you can really do with this diet when combined with hypertrophy training. I think that was one of my biggest takeaways from Carnivore-a-thon, is when Robert Sykes said that the ketogenic diet paired with resistance training is the closest thing that we found in Fountain Youth.
Yeah.
And I read that in his book a year ago too. So basically, I took Robert Sykes's book and I treated everything as gospel. Robert Sykes and I have done a lot of work over the years too. So I've never actually hired him as a coach, but we do a lot together with keto bricks. And I took his book and treated it exactly as gospel. Did everything exactly the way he said for the first show. And then for the next 3 shows after that, I started experimenting, and I tried, okay, let's try filling up on protein, and and doing the lower fat approach this time. And then let's try doing it this way. And so I experimented with different peaking protocols. I was eating a pretty big variety of food, and so it was definitely a carnivore keto approach, but I never really got fully meat based and fully cut out all plants until after those competitions. So really the last 6 months, I think, has been the biggest transformation that my wife and I have both experienced with with the therapeutic and the health aspects of the carnivore diet. Right now, I'm 2 days out, I think. Wait, no, today's Wednesday. Yeah, so I'm 3 days out from stepping on stage in Seattle as a guest poser. So not competing, but just guest posing. So if I was actually going to compete, I'd probably want to trim down another 5 or 6 pounds. But I didn't even really have to cut. This is the easiest cut that I've ever done in my life. I only really felt like I was cutting for about a week. And it's been completely counterintuitive, just learning from more of the health practitioners within the carnivore space, like Stephen Thomas and like Richard Smith, and like all these coaches that are advocating to not do cardio if you're in an effort to lose weight and hold on to your muscle mass, which sounded really, really weird. So I went from doing an hour and a half of cardio a day, completely overtraining, to my workout today was 4 sets of leg extensions and 3 sets of leg curls and no cardio. And people are telling me now that I look better than I did when I was 3% body fat and shredded at my last show. Not as competitive as I was, but it certainly feels a lot better. So yeah. Basically, just to sum it up, going back to those last 4 shows, the whole goal with going NPC was to do that, was for exposure, was for networking, and again, comparing to the smaller, what I call hardcore natural federations. If you're going to do a bodybuilding competition, great. You'll never be the same after you're done. You'll never think about food the same. You'll never think about life the same. You'll never think about your body the same, that's for sure. But the experience as a competitor, I found NPC to be more enjoyable in the sense that the costs were less, and I was able to do a lot more networking and meet a lot more people.
Wow. Oh, that's awesome, dude. Thank you for sharing that incredible journey. You've done a lot in your life. I think it's important to point out as well, like if somebody's listening to this and thinking like, okay, bodybuilding, I'm not really interested in bodybuilding. Well, I'm willing to bet that pretty much 100% of our listeners are interested in improving their body composition, losing fat, gaining muscle, feeling better. That is bodybuilding. In my opinion, that is bodybuilding. We are all trying to build up our bodies. We're trying to build up our bodies to be more resilient and more strong, especially when adversity comes along, like the pandemic. Like people who were metabolically fit did really well during the pandemic and had the wherewithal to figure out something else to do with their lives if they lost their jobs or whatever. Like we are all bodybuilders. What do you think about that?
Yep, I 100% agree. And you know who else agrees is Arash Rabar. I'm not sure if you've heard of him, but he was when Classic Physique came out, like the first year that they did Classic Physique, the IFBB. I think he got either second or third, and he was in the top 5 for the first couple of years in a row until the athletes just started getting way too big. And I mean, I love Chris Bumstead. I love Breon Ansley. I love the guys that have been winning it lately, but I kind of missed when it came out and the physiques were a little bit smaller, like Sadiq Hadzovic, and they were, I think, just in my personal opinion, a bit more representative of the golden era aesthetics, and that's kind of what I try to shoot for. But yeah, Arash Rabar, I remember him saying on an interview that we're all bodybuilders. If you go into the gym, you're a bodybuilder. Just bodybuilding doesn't just mean competing. Of the athletes I'm training right now, I'm training 17 athletes. About a third of them are competitive bodybuilders, meaning that like they've come to me because they're already on a low carb meat-based diet. They've come because they've been on the diet because they got a thyroid issue or an autoimmune issue or something, or maybe they've just actually done their homework and found that it's the fountain youth. So then they hire me as a coach to get a pro card at that point. I would say a third of our athletes are advanced hypertrophy athletes, bodybuilders, but not competitive. So more like what you're describing. And then a third of them are beginners, which is low key, not really on social media, but still bodybuilders nonetheless. Because what are we all trying to do? We're trying to we're trying to minimize body fat, right? I mean that's kind of the goal for everybody, to a point to where it's healthy and sustainable. It's not realistic to be 3% body fat for very long. Well, I guess it is realistic, but it's not worth it. Trust me. And then whether you're one of those guys that wants to have really big muscles, or like me, like I just want to have fairly big muscles, big enough to where I can see them, but nothing crazy and ridiculous, then yeah, I think that pretty much sums up those last couple categories.
Yeah, interesting. I think a lot of us in the fitness industry got here because we had to deal with our own health issues, or maybe some insecurities or whatever. Like I always have to check myself as far as becoming too obsessive about certain things, and like make sure that I'm not getting too orthorexic myself, where I'm like avoiding entire food groups, which people say you really shouldn't do. However, I also do really good when I stay on a strict carnivore diet, and I don't find it to be restrictive at all. I can eat as much food as I like. Now,
Yeah.
you dealt with a much heavier kind of food issue in your past, which was a lot more severe than anything I've ever had to deal with. But somebody might hear that and think, okay, well, Colt's saying he doesn't feel restricted, yet he's restricting every food except for a few foods in 2 macronutrients. It's basically animal products. What's the difference? How is it not restrictive? And how is a carnivore diet used successfully in many cases for people with addiction issues or food issues of any kind?
That's a very, very good question. So I eat anything that I want whenever I want. But the only food that ever sounds good anymore is beef and keto bricks. I got, and it was, let's see, I'll go ahead and say their names because they've been on my show before too, so they're not shy about being on the podcast. But Wendy, Lucky, and a handful of other ladies, they were and Linnell, she's talked about this on the air too. So they were all meat based before coming to me, and can't be more for body composition consulting, and so now we're getting a couple of them ready for some shows for the next year or two. It's what they want to do. Putting a 65-year-old on stage this weekend, that's exciting.
Amazing.
Yeah, that'll be a big win for her. But I'm just going to be completely honest. I thought these ladies were crazy. I was like, are you kidding me? You want me to write you a meal plan that has nothing but ground beef in it? That's it. Nothing else. I mean, no bone broth, no organs, like no salad. Like you're not going to make burgers or put cheese on them or anything. I mean, like you could make bacon burgers. It'd be really easy to hit your macros with bacon. and there's no. I mean, it just doesn't sound good. Just ground beef, please. And like they don't know each other. They're all different points of the country. They all heard us on someone else's show, started listening to our show, and then eventually reached out. And then I was just like, you know what? Maybe you all know something that I don't know. And so I just started trying it. And then after a few weeks, I was like, this is great. Like I don't want chicken anymore. I don't want pork anymore. I really don't miss everything. And if you're addicted to carbs, carbohydrates are very, very highly addictive. That was the first thing that my bodybuilding coach, Alfred Rowe, actually, that's the interview that we just published, I think last week, was me catching up with my competition coach. We talked about biohacking, we talked about all kinds of stuff, but cutting sugar in particular, he's the one that taught me initially that sugar has been proven in rat studies to be more addictive than crack cocaine. I've never done crack cocaine, but I've heard it's extremely addictive.
It's great. You should try it.
Oh man, okay, yeah. You and I, we need to go play hockey and definitely.
Perfect.
Let's make plans for that off the air. But I had to get off of sugar first, and once I did that, and once it had been a while since I had carbohydrates, then I got to a point to where I was like, you can tell when you're fully fat adapted. And this is something that I wanted to ask you about too, because you talked at Carnivore-a-thon about what happens when you do get fully fat adapted, and when you do get fully meat adapted, and it does take quite some time. For some people, it can take maybe a month or two of being very, very strict. But you get to a point to where the biggest way that I can tell right now is I test every day with a breath ketone monitor called BioSense. And I'm in as absolute deep of ketosis as I can be. I'm pretty much never out of ketosis. But that's also because of how I'm doing my macros. I'm not getting carried away with the protein, and I'm going super high on the fat right now. So it's been, to touch on earlier, it's been better for the life after hours, if you know what I mean. So yeah, you got to keep those dietary fats high. That's a secret, okay, guys?
There we go.
Yeah. So I'm sorry, we're cutting sugar and getting. Oh yeah, when I am fully fat adapted, the way that I can tell is my muscle bellies are full and they never go flat. I have not felt flat the way that I always have been on competition prep. So I don't think I was really fully fat adapted or fully meat adapted until a couple of months ago. That's what I talked to Bart Kay. That's when I started consulting with Stephen Thomas from the UK, the host of the Carnivore Experience and host of Carnivore-a-thon, and started talking more with people like you, basically, and realizing that, okay, there's more to this than I thought there was, and I think the plants that I have been eating up to that point have been doing more damage than good. So I stopped taking most of the supplements that I was taking. I even stopped taking creatine because I'm eating so much red meat. I just feel like eating more is overkill. That was a good move. So I'm feeling fuller, stronger, and my energy levels are very, very consistent throughout the day. That didn't exist until a couple of months ago.
Yeah, that's amazing. I was actually going to ask you about supplementation and how that has changed on a carnivore diet. I certainly found the same thing that, I used to recommend lots of supplements. I've taken tons of supplements over the course of my life and my health journey. And going carnivore, I've just kind of done this experiment where if I run out of something, I'll just not buy it the next day. You know what I mean? I'll just say okay, I just ran out of this organ supplement, or I just ran out of vitamin D, or I just ran out of fish oil. Let me just wait a few days. Let me give it a week or 2 weeks or whatever. And let me see, if I feel terrible having not taken it for a week or two, then great. I'll just go on Amazon or wherever I get my supplements and order some, and I'll start taking it again. I know that's an effective way. But I just noticed that I never feel that way. I never feel like I miss any of the supplements I've cut out. I also don't take anything. So are you on no supplements, even though you're really focused on bodybuilding?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so the only supplements I'm taking, I'm taking a fraction of what I was taking before. The supplements that I'm taking now is let's see. Well, let's go with what I was taking before. Pre-workout, and I'm talking a lot of it. I'm talking abusive amounts. I'm talking 400 or 500 milligrams of caffeine a day through this last season. Oh, it gets worse. The season before that, before I was meat based and before I had a coach, that was I was taking about 1,500 milligrams of caffeine a day. In addition to the other stimulants that are in there, like DMHA, Ariagerensis, and half of those stimulants are banned anymore. So
my goodness.
Yeah, I mean that's how low my energy was, pal. I was just any kind of stimulant that I could get my hands on to get through my workout and get through the day. It got to a point to where I couldn't even like wake up and function and like go do my job that day without pre-workout. Not without coffee, but without pre-workout, dude.
Well, there you go. If we do crack cocaine together, you won't even get a kick out of it. So I guess we don't have to do crack cocaine now.
I know we got to think of something a little more hardcore.
We'll figure it out. We'll figure it out. That's crazy. That's enough caffeine to like tranquilize a horse, dude.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
Wow.
It was ridiculous. It got completely out of hand, and I think I was definitely using it as a crutch, as an appetite stimulant too. So to be able to adhere to my diet, I would do that, which didn't work because your body's not smart. It figures it out, and it'll play catch up sooner or sooner rather than later if you abuse your satiety signals. So so then I would find myself completely over binging and overcompensating, like all the time. So those are memories I try to forget. Carnivore diet has been very, very therapeutic in giving me an organized way to be able to get past that and improve my health in the meantime. So, I mean, really, it was a blessing in disguise. Like, I almost wonder sometimes if it wasn't that bad, would I have gone to the extreme to just cut carbs altogether and never look back? And, you know, I'm certainly glad I made that decision. So, yeah, pre-workout, creatine, let's see, glutamine, BCAAs, electrolytes. I could go on and on, man. Let's keep this podcast a little bit shorter. So right now, all I'm taking is not even taking electrolytes. I'm taking Hydra EAA, half a scoop. So not branched chain amino acids, but it has all 20 of them, including L-glutamine. And then I supplement trans allyl glutamine, which is similar to L-glutamine, but there's an alanine bond attached to it. It makes it more bioavailable. So one of the first things that you notice is if you're someone that's been taking L-glutamine for quite some time, and then you switch to trans allyl glutamine, should help your digestion better because it's not being wasted in the way that kind of like creatine monohydrate, how your body uses half of it and the rest of it just spills over into your subcutaneous layer, and that's why you get a little bit of water retention with creatine monohydrate. So glutamine, kind of the same thing. Trans allyl glutamine, that's what I'm taking right now, and that's pretty much it for supplementation. I cut caffeine altogether about 3 months ago too, around the same time that I went to the modified lion diet.
Yeah, well, thank you for doing that 3 months ago and not like yesterday. You would have been terrible to talk to if you had done it yesterday.
Bro,
We
I
would
was
schedule it.
Oh no, the withdrawal symptoms from cutting caffeine were a nightmare. Like they
Oh
were
my
hitting
goodness.
me. Oh yeah, because I did it with a couple other clients too. I was like, I looked at Jordan, and I looked at I remember, oh no, and it was the other one was just a friend, not a client, but I looked at these guys and I was like, okay, we're all cutting caffeine and we're all going to hold each other accountable to this, right? And then like another week, like, have you had coffee yet? No. Have you had coffee yet? No. All right, we're all still on the bandwagon, and we made it. So we made it like 4 weeks all together, and then I think they ended up reintroducing coffee in like a healthy, actual, sustainable way. But since it was so hard to cut, it backfired so bad, that proved to me that it was an addiction, that it was running areas of my life, that it just had to go. You don't want to be a slave to anything. You don't want to be a slave to food. You don't want to be a slave to a drug. You don't want to be a slave to even a supplement. If you're taking a supplement for the purpose of having better cognition or performing better, you better have a really good return on investment, because that's your hard-earned money. That's something that you're putting into your body, and who knows what the side effects of it are. I mean, yeah, branched chain amino acids, they're great for building muscle. They're great for retaining muscle, but they can also knock you out of ketosis. And what other ingredients are there in there? You got to look at the big picture.
Yeah, I love that. Have a reason and make sure you're getting a return on investment. I think that's really great advice. Okay, so you mentioned something that I've really noticed in the carnivore community as well, which is electrolytes. I know you're a big fan of Redmond sea salt and Celtic salt, which are both great. We've talked to lots of people from Redmond over the years in different episodes and talked about salt and the importance of salt. I've noticed that when people go keto, low carb, that salt becomes really, really important. I've noticed that people's salt intake really increases. I used to kind of shoot salt under my tongue or put it in my water or use like electrolyte drops in my drink. We know there's plenty of like really popular brands out there that sell electrolyte supplements. When somebody pushes into carnivore, especially once they've been doing it for a while, I find the need for salt to really drop out pretty low. Do you know why that is?
Yeah, I do, because when you go carnivore and you cut out, and the difference between keto and carnivore for the most part is that the keto crowd, from what I've observed, having used to, be in that community for quite some time and still in a lot of ways really am and always will be. They're typically they're big on plants and they're fans of and particularly salads, like just salads in the keto community. It's like that's the thing, right? And coffee. And so between the two, you can get carried away with oxalates, and a lot of the plants that you're still consuming can do more damage than good, and they're robbing you of nutrients that you are already getting from your meat. So your meat has everything you need. That's why these ladies that were like, oh, I feel great when I eat just nothing but ground beef, no salad, blah 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 blah. I mean, that's what my body's telling me I need. That's what my body's telling me that I need. I love training women because women are very, very intuitive, and they have ways of explaining things in a way that guys tend to try to over intellectualize. But women are very, very in tune with their bodies. And so when I listened to all of them and I started to experience the same thing, I started realizing my craving for salt to decrease as well. And so the salt and the additional electrolytes are necessary if you're low. But if you're on a species appropriate diet, which consists of mainly muscle meat from ruminant animals, that has everything you need. You don't need to be supplementing additional electrolytes on top of that unless you have a specific health condition that requires it.
Yeah, that's very well explained. I really appreciate that. You've alluded to this already. I wonder if you can explain the difference between fat and protein in your diet and how you balance those two out. How would somebody know that they're getting enough fat and or enough protein?
Okay. Can we have like a bit more of a specific example? Like someone comes and says like they want to lose weight or they want to build muscle.
Let's do it in the context of body composition. Yeah, that's a really good idea. Let's provide some context to that. So let's say it's body composition improvement. I want to lose fat. I want to gain muscle. I've heard carnivore can help. How would you think about, that kind of transformation as somebody who was maybe getting started, or how that would transition over time? How it's just something that comes up all the time. People talk about the fat to protein ratio, and there's so many different ideas about it. I just want to know how you are thinking about that. And let's go with that that particular context. Somebody who wants to lose fat, increase muscle.
Okay. Yeah. So I'll start with me, and then I'll just throw out a random example then of like a beginner. So my protocol right now, for the last 3 months to guest pose, and I'm starting my own underwear line. So the samples are coming in for those too. So our other business, this is what we did in the pandemic too. I didn't think we had time to go into that, but just to touch on, we started our own skull themed workout equipment line. And so we still do that today. We have skull barbells, we have skull dumbbells, and they're called SkullBellz. And those are just all on our website, supersetyourlife.com as well, under the SkullBellz tab. So SkullBellz, that's something that we've been doing for the last 3 years now. And the underwear are going to be 100% cotton, because if they're polyester, then that can cause damage to your boys, which you don't want as men, especially if you plan on having kids, so or performing well in the gym and other places. So they're cotton underwear, and they say SkullBellz across the butt, and I think they look pretty cool. I don't know, they should be showing up any time today. Actually, I just got the tracking info on those.
Nice.
So yeah, so that's kind of been my project, is to cut down for that, and it doesn't require me getting shredded. It just requires me being probably like 5 or 10 pounds above stage weight right now, is what I would say that I am. But my lean body mass, let's see, I'm 6'1" and I weigh 196.2 pounds this morning. So that means that my lean body mass is probably somewhere around 180 pounds. And then everything else, that means that everything else is fat. And so that means that I need to have about 180 grams of protein to safely maintain the muscle mass that I have when cutting. And you can drop it a bit lower in most cases and temporarily and still be okay there. But you really don't ever want to be too much lower than where that protein threshold is. And then if you get too much higher than it, that can cause your excess protein to spill over into muscle glycogen by a process called gluconeogenesis. That's nothing to be super concerned about short-term. Long-term, chronically, now it's kind of just the same thing as a high carb diet. You still get the insulin spike. It's not the exact same thing as eating carbs, but it does come with quite a bit of inflammation. And so the way to tell if you're consuming too much protein, your body will tell you. You're gonna start getting aches and pains. Your sleep isn't gonna be what it should. Your digestion isn't gonna be what it should. Not to be immature or anything, but I'm not the most mature guy that there is anyway, so who cares? But I don't really pass gas anymore. And all through high school and like up until a few years ago, really until I went meat-based, I was passing gas and farting just like all the time.
Oh yeah, totally. You're not fermenting anything in your stomach anymore.
Right. Yeah. And so now I feel lighter. I feel 10 times better. But anyway, going back to, I'm sorry, where was I? On the cut and on protein levels. So that's how you can tell if you're at too much protein. So right now my protein never really changes between 190 to 210, probably on a higher day. On a refeed day, I might go as much as 250, but you don't want to do that too many days in a row. And then my fats, I always recommend having higher than protein. There are situations where it makes sense to drop your fats lower, but generally speaking, my fat is always higher, which can scare you looking at the paper, which is why none of my clients have any idea of how many calories they're consuming. All we track is protein, carbs, and fat, and that's it. If they do have carbs in their diet, most of our athletes don't. I obviously recommend that none of them do, but we live in a world where we got to think about what's realistic and what's sustainable too, and kind of accommodate for everybody's lifestyles. So try to keep my fats quite a bit higher, and that'll let my body know that I should be using fat as my fuel source and not protein. Protein is a very inefficient fuel source. Fat is a wonderful fuel source. Unfortunately, you can't really tap into it as long as you have carbohydrates in your diet, because carbs are toxic to the body. As soon as your body sees those carbs, it goes, these carbs are toxic to the body, so let's get them the heck out of here. So your body prefers to burn carbs. And then you have the high carb crowd that's like, oh, that's our argument. Your body prefers to burn carbs. I'm like, yeah, it prefers to burn carbs because they're toxic. It's like, get this stuff out of here. And then once all the carbs are out, then it can start burning fat. So that's pretty much how I've treated my cutting journey. I just went from nothing crazy. I just went from 208, I think, is as high as I got, all the way down to 196. So if I had someone that came to me and said, hey, I'm a lady, I'm 40 years old and I weigh 130 pounds, I'm 5'4". If she weighs 130 pounds and she's 15% body fat, I'm just doing the math off the top of my head, that would be like probably around 110 pounds of lean body mass, 105, 110 pounds, somewhere around there. So I would recommend that her protein starts there, but I'm going to let her know it's a moving target. So if more protein sounds better, great, eat it. If it's a struggle for you to eat that much protein, you don't have to hit that number either. So this is a ballpark number for you to weigh out your food. But if you have to go north or south a little bit, that's okay. And then fat should always be higher. So I would start their fat like around 170 or 180. I would say that most people, and here again, I need to know what they're eating beforehand, just to have a rough idea of their activity level and what they've been eating before. So we use that as a guideline to start with typically. And then if the goal is to cut, what I would usually recommend in a cut is to drop the protein first and keep the fats there, which is pretty counterintuitive because generally speaking, when anybody goes into a cut, what do you want to do? Bump up the protein so that you keep your muscle mass and then minimize fat, minimize carbs. Bad idea. You're going to wreck your hormones if you do that, because fats are so much more important to your hormonal health to make sure that you have an adequate amount of dietary fat. You're fine without protein for a day or two. Fats are very, very key. And so I try to always have those higher than protein for a health reason, but then for a performance reason too. If someone's cutting, in order to minimize any gluconeogenesis spillover that's taking place, dropping the protein, way better start to your cut than dropping fat. I hope that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. And it's like you said, it is very counterintuitive. And I have some people tell me that fat that you consume does not get stored as fat. When the fat comes into the body through chylomicrons, gets into the blood and gets delivered everywhere, it's used as fuel. Then I also hear people tell me that if you overconsume the fat, it will hinder weight loss. Where are you on that? It sounds like you are recommending very high amounts of fat and seeing that people are able to lose fat all the time.
Mhm. Yeah, so Dr. Anthony Chafee, I believe, is the one who is it was either him or Dr. Ken Berry that was citing that getting into ketosis will increase your metabolic rate by about 20 or 30%. So I think that has a lot to do with it. The bigger picture and the reason that I think it works is especially when it comes to cutting, is getting rid of the insulin spike that is happening every single time that you consume more protein than what your body needs. And it's not the end of the world. I mean, like if you're spilling over, a little bit isn't that big of a problem. Now, if you're doing 400 grams of protein a day, which I used to do, I used to do this actually before I realized that it was a bad idea. And so I used to, do something like 400 grams of protein a day, then 80 grams of fat, which is still adequate fat.
Wow.
To not really, yeah. I mean, it's still adequate enough fat to not really to not really suffer any hormonal consequences from that regard, from just specifically having a lack of fat. But basically what you're doing, what that's the same as is 200 grams of protein, 200 grams of carbs, and 80 grams of fat, because those extra 200 grams of protein are just becoming carbs anyway. So I was doing that for a while because I'm like, all right, not eating carbs, but it basically feels like a high carb diet because when I train fast in the morning, it feels the same as when I would as what I would carb load. Then when I would go back to keto and go with a lower protein approach and higher fat, I would find my energy levels to be more consistent throughout the day, which is great. It's a step in the right direction. So I was like, seems like there is benefits to both, until I got fully fat adapted. And then my energy was not only consistent throughout the entire day, but typically high throughout the day, which is what it is right now.
Yeah, well, that's really well explained. I appreciate that. Related to that question, do you think you're giving anything away by not consuming carbohydrates to maximize your muscle gains? I would say that, like, especially when I first transitioned, maybe not so much anymore, but like if I had a really hard shift in hockey, I might be able to stay out maybe like 20 or 30 seconds less now that I'm not eating any carbs than I used to before. Again, I notice that less the more that I'm on carnivore, especially if I'm doing a good job eating plenty of red meat and eggs the day before a game. I notice a lot less of that. I wonder if I could maybe gain that extra 5% by incorporating carbohydrates back in my diet. I'm just not willing to do it because I know I'll have anxiety. I am just like you. I have to abstain from sugar in
Wow,
particular.
I didn't realize that.
Yeah, no, that was the reason that kept me on carnivore. It was really unexpected, actually. I wanted to try it to see, if I would die of a heart attack, and the thing that kept me on it was realizing that, like, wow, for the first time ever, I'm actually like really calm and I can think really clearly, and the anxiety I didn't think I had just kind of magically went away. So anyway, for me, it's not worth, if I am giving something away at the very highest anaerobic whatever. For you as a bodybuilder, do you feel like you're giving anything away by not having carbohydrates in your diet?
No, and I tested it because I was really curious too. And so when I was eating carbs in my competitions, it was all sweet potatoes. After I hired a coach, that is. Before it was whatever. Like I was like, oh great, so great, a Krispy Kreme donut has 200 calories, awesome, and I can totally fit that in and make it work. That was a wreck. That is just people on YouTube trying to fire sell workout plans and meal plans, and you nailed it on your talk too at Carnivoreathon about how the easiest thing to do as an online coach is to make someone train more, eat less, and lose weight, and it works. It absolutely works, but it's not sustainable. Okay, great. You get down to how you want to look. If you make it there, and if you do make it there, your hormones are probably out of whack. If you're a female, hopefully you haven't lost your cycle. And hopefully you don't have a binge eating disorder at that point, because and your metabolism's shot. So now you got to rebuild it, and then you've got all this work on the back end to do. The cycle of bulking and cutting, bulking and cutting, bulking and cutting. It has to go. It has to go. It's killing people's health. Within the carnivore space, you don't see that. You don't even hear people talk about building muscle and losing muscle so much as making it a way of life that's sustainable that they enjoy. and then and then your physique comes as a byproduct of it, right? So someone that wants to do a bodybuilding competition on a meat-based diet, like 2 years from now or 3 years from now, we're not talking in terms of bulking and cutting. We're optimizing their diet. We're following satiety signals, and you need to listen to your body and train appropriately. Make sure that your muscles are growing, and you can tell by your improvements in the gym and by progress pictures. That's pretty much all that we use. That and weight. We just use all those metrics, and that'll get you headed in the right direction. Slow and steady wins the race. But to do a bulk and to throw carbs in, and to try to use carbs to get bigger, all that's going to do is it's going to come with a lot of water weight. It's not going to give you better gym performances. From what I've found, being meat-based, I'm getting better gym performances, but you have to abstain from carbs long-term for it to work. Those first couple of weeks after cutting carbs are going to be rough. So anyway, the very last show that I did, the last competition that I did was actually 2 shows back to back. There was a natural show, and then there was a untested show immediately afterwards, and I did both of them because I wanted to. I mean, it was the same promoters, and it was back to back. So if you're going to do one more show, it's like, why not just throw in with the big boys, knowing I'm going to get my butt kicked, right?
Oh my goodness! Wow.
Yeah, so I did the natural show, and my goal was to out shred everyone, and I got lean, and I got lean enough to basically be the leanest person on the stage, but I wasn't very happy with my placings. I could have placed better, and everybody that beat me just flat out had more muscle mass. I had more muscle mass than I did at my last show. That was kind of my goal, right? Was for to be a personal win. So like obviously I built plenty of muscle between 2019 to 2022 without carbohydrates. But when I did that show, I just got beat by athletes that were bigger and that had been doing it longer. This is quite a bit bigger than the shows I'd done before. So then the one immediately after, there was no drug testing. It was not a natural show. So here I am, a natural guy against all these enhanced guys. And the night before, I'm thinking of who I'm going to go up against. And I'm like, I don't stand a chance. Like I'm not even going to place. What am I going to do? So I ate 8 pounds of sweet potatoes. I'm not even kidding. I ate 8 pounds of sweet potatoes. I pre-planned this because I knew the difference between in the judging between the shows and who was going to be there, and I gained 7 pounds on the scale. So
wow!
I literally blew up. My sleep was a wreck. I felt miserable in the morning. I wanted to throw up. I just felt like a joke. I mean, my entire body was stiff. I felt absolutely miserable, and I'm not blaming carbs for it. It's definitely the amount of carbs I ate. Okay, I get that. I know that. But again, this isn't health. This is bodybuilding. I wanted to win. I didn't want to win. I knew that wasn't a possibility. I wanted to place, and yeah, I got 5th place in classic physique, and that was better than winning the hockey. That was better than winning the high school hockey championship. I mean, I just felt on top of the world, man. I was like, are you kidding me? I placed. And that's it right there, actually.
Nice. Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah,
Dude, very cool.
That trophy. And so that's the note that we ended on. So from a performance standpoint within the gym and long-term building muscle, no, carbs are not, and there's no science that shows that you need carbs to build muscle. The only things that you need to build muscle are stimulus, protein, water, and sleep. That's it. Nothing else. Carbs are not one of those. If carbs help you to get a better workout and get a better stimulus, great. But that will not help you build quality muscle that's going to be there long term. If you go on a dirty bulk with carbs, you're going to get bigger and you're going to get excited because you're going to see the scale going up, and then you're probably just going to be bigger because you're retaining so much more water and more glycogen, but it's not quality muscle mass. And so then you go to cut when you eventually want to get rid of the fat that you gained because you were putting carbs in your diet. Now you have all this work to do on the back end, and it's going to take more time. And whenever you're cutting for too long, you're probably going to lose muscle mass at some point, no matter how you're doing it. And so you're still back to square one.
Yeah. No, that's such a good point. And when I see people making cuts for their shows, it's not the numbers that you were mentioning earlier, where you went from 208 to 196. It's like they're going from 230 to 190 or something. Like it's such a big delta of weight they have to lose. And so it's just such a better way to approach things. Yeah, that was really well explained. I love that. My last question for you, I have to ask, how did you land on naming your company supersetyourlife.com?
So my wife and I thought of that together, and it's so funny because yesterday we were actually thinking about rebranding it. We were like, I think our podcast name is too long. It's not, there's shorter, catchier names that that we were throwing around, and then we were just like, you know what? No, we started as Superset Your Life, and we started it for a reason. A superset, like you don't have to be someone that's even picked up a dumbbell probably to know what a superset is. You do one exercise and then you go do a different exercise. Arnold Schwarzenegger's classic example and his favorite superset was always doing a set of bench press, doing a set of chin-ups. Do a set of chin-ups in between every single bench press instead of just sitting there and waiting for your next set. What does that do? It pumps up your biceps, it pumps up your lats, it pumps up all your pulling muscles, gives you better leverage on your bench. You go back to the bench, you can actually bench more because you kept yourself active between sets. So my wife and I thought about this and we were like, you know what? That's a great outlook on life. Why not make health and fitness and going to the gym a superset in of itself? Because if I'm going to do a podcast later in the day, I mean, what did I do right before this podcast? I went out and got a leg pump. It was supposed to be a rest day today. I'm stepping on stage in a couple of days. Like I probably shouldn't be training legs, but I mean, I wanted to be on my A game. I wanted to have a great conversation. And if I don't, and when I work out, it's like a drug, man. I love the dopamine response that I get. I really do. Like I live on it. And that makes me a better business person. It makes me a better dad. My in-laws, God bless their heart, very, very well meaning. They used to ask my wife, like, does it bother you that your husband is so focused and so regimented and so and like he goes to the gym every single day? Like, doesn't that bother you? And she goes, no, because you don't want to be around him when he doesn't go to the gym. and so supersetting your life, I believe that fitness in and of itself and going to the gym is something that should make the rest of your life better and not take away from it.
I love that. What a great explanation. A great way to end this conversation. Colt, this has been awesome. You've really educated us about how to improve our health and about how to use a carnivore diet for all kinds of different things, including body composition. So where would you like people to go to find you and connect with you and your work?
Appreciate it. Thanks. Everything's just on our podcast. So we got the supersetyourlife.com podcast. That one we keep focused on faith, on family, and on fitness. And then we have a new show with Jonathan Griffiths from the UK and from Mark Ennis from Ireland. The three of us are all bodybuilding coaches, all specializing in different aspects of the carnivore diet. And that one is called Carnivore Coaches Corner. And I think it's on about every audio platform that I could find.
Yeah, I really enjoyed the episode of that podcast where all the wives took your places, stole the microphones, and had a little conversation amongst themselves. It was great. I really love that.
Oh, thanks, man. Yeah, we might be working ourselves out of our jobs if we get the wives on there again, because
I'd be nervous
listening to them more.
I'd be nervous, dude. I'd be nervous for sure. No, I really enjoy all your content. Going back and listening to your original podcast was really great to even like listen to the very first conversations that you had, even about stand-up comedy. I love when people can make me interested in things that I don't think I'm very interested in. And it was a great conversation. So I love the content you're putting out. And again, thank you so very much for coming on our show today and really educating us a lot about the carnivore diet and body composition. We really, really appreciate you.
No, the pleasure's been all mine. I hope it was helpful, and thanks again for having me.
Absolutely. Such an honor, Colt. And this has been another episode of Boundless Body Radio.